gives me great pleasure to hand over to the Dean of the School of Health and Life Sciences, Professor Anita Simmers, who will formally introduce today's guest speaker. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you, John. Thank you for introducing me as well. As John just said, my name is Anita Simmers, and I'm Dean for the School of Health and Life Sciences here at GCU. It is my absolute pleasure this afternoon to welcome you all to our Captains of Industry talk, particularly to introduce our speaker this afternoon, John Burns. John is currently the Chief Operating Officer for NHS Scotland, but we are also very proud to say that John is an extremely good friend of the university. So again, welcome, John. There's a lot of Johns this afternoon. So this afternoon, John is going to share his exceptional career journey with us all, as well as insights into the challenges currently being faced by NHS Scotland. But first, let's hear a little bit more about John. And don't worry, John, I have got no baby photographs, so simple biography. In 2021, John took up the position of Chief Operating Officer for NHS Scotland. Prior to this, he was the Chief Executive of NHS Ayrshire and Arran for 9 years. John has worked in several roles across NHS Scotland over the last 39 years, Tayside, Glasgow, Dumfries and Galloway, and Ayrshire and Arran. The last 20 years in chief executive roles. Throughout his career, John has been involved in many national programmes, including financial shared services, diagnostics, technology, enabled care, health and safety, and waiting times. John has also held the position of Regional Chief Executive Lead for the West of Scotland from 2016 to 2021. John is very passionate about leadership and believes that we need to support and develop our leaders to flourish in the 21st century. Working in complex ecosystems, John feels that we need leaders that are able to adapt and to build effective networks that will enable high quality services for our citizens. John also believes that compassionate leadership is a strength that supports a healthier, engaged, and a high-performing workplace. So we are extremely grateful for everything you do for our university, John, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you here this afternoon. So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce you to deliver this afternoon's talk. So I'll now hand over.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I've got a short presentation that I thought I would just walk through, and then we can go to questions. So if I go to the next slide, what I intend to run through is a little bit about my background and my academic journey, and then just to talk through my career journey and to highlight some of the key points in that journey. Thirdly, to share some insights. Then just to spend a moment reflecting on leadership in the 21st century, which actually would be a session on its own. I could speak for a long time on this. It's a real passion and interest of mine. And I thought I would just finish by talking about some of the challenges for our NHS as we look forward through 23-24 and beyond. So if I start with a little bit of background for you, I come from a working class background. I am a husband, a dad, a hill walker, a rugby fan that follows Scotland and the Glasgow Warriors, and a reader. And just to give you a sense, my reading goes from Leadership Paradox, which is sitting on my desk just now, through to crime novels. So a very different range of interests. I was the first to study for a degree in my family, and that was quite a big thing in terms of both being able to take that step and to go where others hadn't. And it was a very exciting time. But I think it gave me that first sense of confidence in terms of what can be achieved and indeed what I could achieve. I went to Dundee College of Technology, now University of Aberdeen. I should say I was brought up in Fife and St Andrews and Cooper. So I was awarded a BA Honours in Business Studies in 1982. And then 10 years later, I did, a few years later, I did my diploma in Health Services Management, which was a part-time study over 3 years. And then 10 years on, did my MBA, which again, I did at night classes over 3 years. I then went on to do health economics for a year. And I found that range of study really equipped me in the work that I was doing, and it supported me in thinking about how I developed my career and the roles that I subsequently went on to do. This year, a bit of a milestone for me. So in September, I'll have done 40 years in the NHS in Scotland. Something I'm proud of. I'm proud to be part of the NHS and the NHS in Scotland, and to reach that 40-year milestone, it feels just like yesterday that I started. So in terms of career timeline, just I'm not going to take you through this. It would be here forever. When I was putting these slides together, I suddenly realized just how many different jobs I had. There's a couple of things I'd like to flag. So I graduated, and one of the things I had really enjoyed in my studies was employee relations. And I thought, here was a job in personnel in what was then called the Dundee district offices. We've had a lot of change in my 40 years. And so applied and was successful, but it wasn't what I thought. I was doing junior doctors' contracts, residential accommodation, and general personnel work. And I have to say, these were the days that when you went to support interviews, that's what you did. You supported from the corner while the panel did the interview. And you sat with a very heavy tome of terms and conditions to advise on detail. So I had the thought about this. I thought, well, actually, this isn't quite what I was looking for. But I looked across and I saw this really quite exciting space of hospital administration. And so the first thing that I decided to do was take a sideways move. And after 18 months of being an assistant personnel officer, I took a sideways move into administration, still in Dundee. Learnt a huge amount doing that. And that catapulted me into then moving from the east of Scotland over to the west. I've spent quite a time in Glasgow, and all my time in South Glasgow. First starting as a deputy sector administrator, and suddenly finding myself responsible for 4 hospitals and all of the support services. And one of the things in my career, and I'll touch on this in the insights, that I've found really stimulating is the opportunity to do new things, difficult and complex things. And at the time in the 80s, compulsive competitive tendering was one of the key issues of the day. And I found myself leading in-house teams. And that was a real challenge because you were competing against the private sector. And one of the things I'm proud of is that I won every bid that I submitted. And we maintained those roles within our own services. But then I got a chance, and again, this is where you have to take opportunity. My then general manager phoned me and said, can you come and chat? And he said, we need you to move to the Southern General tomorrow because the administrator there has taken ill and we need someone to cover. Would you like to do it? Well, I thought, why not? You know, what a great opportunity. And that started my journey in the south of Glasgow, in the southern, where, as you can see from the timeline, I had a range of jobs, from being the administrator through to being various director roles, running allied health professionals, medical records, planning, contracting in the days of trusts, and then ultimately planning and performance. But all opportunities evolved as the organisation evolved. And I was determined to take those opportunities when they arose. If I then move on, after, oh gosh, nearly 12 years in the Southern General, working with great people, and indeed South Glasgow, I thought that it was time to think about moving on to the next point in my career. The NHS in Scotland had changed over time, so there were fewer opportunities, but an opportunity came up to go to Dumfries to be the Chief Executive of the Acute and Maternity Hospitals Trust. And I've just put in some numbers there just to give you a sense of the scale of the organisation. But again, that was the start of my, really the next part of my journey into senior leadership in different parts of Scotland. But you know, again, it's about how you respond to different events. Because I had taken this job, I was delighted and excited to be doing the job, and within just a few months, the chairman of the health board and the chairman and the chief executive of the health board came and said, "We think we've got too many organisations in Dumfries and Galloway, and we want to reduce down in number." So this meant that this job that I had secured was going to disappear in about 12 months' time. But there was opportunity in that. And the opportunity was to move into being Deputy Chief Executive of the Health Board, to broaden my knowledge, because I'd worked in acute hospitals for all of my career. And I suddenly found myself in the midst of having to learn about general practice, dentistry, mental health, as well as acute care. And I remember vividly day one standing in a general practice talking to the media about the importance of general practice in community services. So a real baptism of fire, but again, a real opportunity. And from that came the opportunity to apply for and get the chief exec job. And I did that for 8 years in Dumfries and Galloway. And I led a lot of change in the board, and was able to develop services such as mental health. So again, some working with great people, and hopefully building some legacy as we go. And then I decided that it was time to move to a bigger role, and I applied for and became Chief Exec of NHS Ayrshire and Arran. And again, you can just see again the scale of the organisation. And again, that was a role with many challenges. I was there for 9 years, and again worked with great people. And of course, I was there during the pandemic, and I think that's been one of the greatest challenges of my career. And I've had many. Was the pandemic. And I thought, you know, as chief exec at Ayrshire and Arran, I was enjoying it. I was 9 years in. I thought that might be my last career point. And then the chief operating officer for NHS Scotland came up, and I decided I would be up for another challenge, and again applied, was successful. I've been there for nearly 2 years now. And again, you can see from the slide the range of things that I'm involved in: performance delivery, recovery, planning, intelligence and analysis, resilience. And I also co-chair with the Chief Medical Officer the Climate Change and Sustainability Programme Board for NHS Scotland. So that's my career timeline over 2 slides. One thing that I wanted to draw out was just some insights from that time. And I've tried to keep it pretty focused. So the first thing is I've had the benefit of good mentors. I've had great people who've supported me and who have given me opportunity to do difficult things when I maybe didn't quite have all of the confidence, but they had the confidence and they were willing to support. And that's something I've taken on in my leadership roles. Take opportunities and be brave. I know that's easy to say, but actually when I was, look back, it's because of that I've been able to do some fantastic things, meet some really interesting, challenging and exciting people, and also develop my own skills and take those forward. I hope to add greater value to the roles I've done. Be curious. I really encourage people to be curious, because by being curious, we learn, we understand, and I think we become better people and better leaders and better decision makers. I think this next one's fundamental, and it's one I learned, later on in my career. I wish I'd learned this earlier, that actually making mistakes is okay. You're going to get things wrong, and as long as you learn from them and you build forward from them, then that learning is just part of learning, and it's part of that learning cycle. Key to everything is relationships. I couldn't imagine doing the work that I do without good relationships. As a chief executive in a health board, you're working with leaders of Police Scotland, councils. You're working across education, a whole range of stakeholder interests, and those relationships are key in terms of taking forward change and innovation and success. But the other thing I've learned, and this of course is something that was in Atul Gawande's book, The Checklist Manifesto, where he tells the story of the no master builder. And in essence, no one of us can do the job. We need many and different skills to be able to do the work we do. And I've just picked this quote out from Matthew Syed's book, Rebel Ideas, about complex problems can't be solved by one person. Indeed, no one person can see the full picture. It's by building strong relationships and working together that we surface, explore, and make meaning of multifactorial challenges we're addressing. I think that's a really true and insightful comment from Matthew Syed. If I move on to then just touch on, and it literally is touching on leadership in the 21st century. I say this is a session in itself. But I think the things that strike me, and this is talked about a lot, but we are working and living, I think, in a very VUCA world. It is volatile, it is uncertain, there is greater complexity, and we are dealing with ambiguity. But I think we can make sense of that if we are clear on purpose, we have strong values, and that we bring people with us and to us, and we engage effectively. And I think I read 2 books by Harvard academic Amy Edmondson, one on psychological safety and one on extreme teaming. And I read both of those books, and there was just like a light bulb going on in terms of the importance of psychological safety and the importance of extreme teaming, which is indeed, if I boil it down and don't do it justice, is about cognitive diversity. It's about bringing different people together with purpose and with a sense of intent to solve a problem. And increasingly, we need to remember that inclusion in all its definition is important, because we need to hear and engage all voices. Again, I look to an interesting book, Accountable Leaders by Molinaro, and he pulls through some of these key points around 21st century leadership. He says it's hard work. I think it is hard work, but I think it's rewarding work. He talks about having vision and purpose, boldness, passion, courage, and determination. And I think we need that. We need that to support our own centeredness and our own resilience, but also to lead others and to engage others and to get that participation in the work that needs to be done. And I think importantly, holding ourselves and those that we lead and work with to high standards and be willing to tackle the tough issues. Communication is always there, isn't it? But communicate with purpose and ambition. I would probably add to that, be deliberate and intentional in what you say and what you mean. And build ownership and engagement, because only by doing that do we build sustainability and we don't build superficial pathways for change. And then just very briefly thinking about the NHS. And of course, the NHS is, well, it'll be 75 years old this year. So I'm not quite as old as that, but I think we are at a really important juncture when we look forward. And I've just pulled out 6 things that I think are important for us to be very clear about and very focused on. They're not new. They are things that we have considered in the past and we will continue to consider in the future. But I think as we come forward from the pandemic and we look to that next decade plus of our health service, I think thinking about the impact of demography, how the population is aging, the change in working age population, the burden of disease and what that means for all of us in terms of our own social responsibility for health and well-being, as well as how we deliver care, health and social care going into the future, inequality and how we address and try and close that gap in inequality, how we think about the models of care that will support our services and our health and care needs in the future. Of course, workforce, notwithstanding the technological advancements, we are still very much a people organisation. And I believe we'll continue to be a people organisation, but we need to be one that is adapting and changing and skilling our workforce. And I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. And of course, we need to think about how we're effectively utilising the money that goes into our health and indeed our health and care services to make sure we are delivering the best we can for people, but we're delivering value-based care as well. And then if I just look to the medium and long term, I think there are some key things that will be important foundations for us. So population health and well-being. This isn't just about how we deliver care when people become ill. It has to be about our population health and well-being. And that's something that goes way beyond the NHS. It impacts on our community planning partners and a range of stakeholders, including us as individuals, and our approach to our health and well-being. We need to think about the role of technology, because I think technology is already playing an important role in helping us to innovate and change. But how is that going to help us going forward? And how will it help support care closer to home or indeed at home, and support quality of life for those that have chronic or long-term conditions? We need to think about how we network our healthcare. One of I think the key features of the 21st century is going to be the importance of networking different bits of the system, networking the different microsystems within larger systems. The NHS is a system made up of multiple networks that engage and interconnect in a complex environment. And we need to make sure our health and social care service delivery is seamless. So if you're in receipt of that, you are getting that seamless service. And in the short term, of course, we faced a very difficult time. The pandemic was a significant shock to the NHS, to society. So we have to recover from the impact. We need to think about new ways of working to support clinical teams. And again, technology will play. I think there's an important role for multidisciplinary teams in thinking about our work in terms of how multidisciplinary teams come together and how different skills blend and complement each other. And indeed, how we extend scope and advanced practice, leading to new roles and building on the new roles that we already see in our NHS, and I think give a very strong sense of the opportunity that exists and the exciting roles and opportunity to work in our NHS and indeed within health and social care. And I think that's my last slide. So I think then, Anita, were questions.
Thank you very much, John. Apologies, just unmuting myself. Yes, thank you for a very fascinating journey through your career. I'm sure our students and graduates online today will have gleaned many nuggets of advice from your insights, but also you're very frankly addressing the challenges that we face today in the delivery of healthcare. We've got a whole host of questions, so nobody wants to hear me. They all want to hear from you. So I'm going to just bash straight on with the questions. Very much fall into two camps. Questions around, not surprisingly, the NHS and the challenges we're currently facing, but also questions very much about you, John, and what makes you the leader that you are today. So I think, first of all, what we'll do is we might concentrate on NHS type questions, if that works for everybody. So you have sort of addressed this in your talk, but we have a question from Mariam, who is one of our students, and she's asking, what do you feel is the most pressing and urgent issue in the NHS today, currently? I suppose, what is the top of your to-do list? I expect it's a big list.
Yeah, it's a big to-do list. I think that I would have to say that recovery is the most important, and of course that covers many things. You know, as I said in my remarks, I worked through the pandemic as a chief executive, and I saw firsthand the impact that had on staff, the impact it had on the way we had to overnight change the way that we were going to deliver our services. I saw the impact it had on our access to services. And of course, since coming into this role, one of the key priorities that is sitting on my agenda is how we recover and renew from the pandemic. And that has been challenging because COVID is still with us, and therefore we need to learn to work and shape our services accordingly. And recovery is really a term that we must do all we can to recover from our waiting times, and there's a huge amount of effort going in right across our NHS to do that. We need to also recognise the impact it's had on our workforce and make sure we continue to support our workforce as they help to deliver that recovery. Because everything I do and everything leaders do is because of the great efforts of teams that work in the front line. And we must remember that at all times. And I think as we look at that, thinking about not just recover back to a pre-pandemic state, but actually how we recover forward, and how we do that by using new technologies, deploying new ways of working, and trying to ensure we're building that recovery forward for the future. I'll stop there.
Okay, that's great, John. Actually, in your answer there's a couple of other questions that have been put forward around those points. So there was one from Julie, who is one of our graduates, and that is on waiting times. And Julie would like to know, after the publication of the Scottish Government's Women's Health Plan, while that is indeed a welcome step forward, raising awareness around women's health issues, Julie is questioning how much real progress is really taking place in reducing the diagnosis of endometriosis from an average of 8 years to 1 year, when waiting times for your first outpatient appointment can sometimes be up to 40 weeks in some areas. So I suppose that's a very specific condition, but maybe around waiting lists in general and initiatives that are currently underway.
Yeah, so I think firstly, having a women's health plan and that focus is is a real positive, and I know that that's been welcomed. I think waiting times, this is difficult because, of course, this is about people. It's not numbers. It's about people who are waiting to see a specialist, and we have built a significant challenge on the back of the pandemic, and so trying to bring those waiting times down so that we can get back to a service where we don't have the long waits that we have is going to be, it's not going to be easy, and I that we have to be honest about that. I think that what I would say is that we are still focused on urgent care. So if there is an urgent need, then we do prioritize urgent appointments, whether that's new outpatient appointments or surgery. But it's going to take us time to recover back to where we need to be. And I think that we are seeing, as a result of the pandemic, there's increasing demand as well for services. So we have put forward and are delivering both in terms of just seeing more people, because that's critical, but we are also looking to deliver those services in different ways to create more capacity in our clinics and in our theatres to support our clinical teams, because there is no doubt, one of the great joys, and I maybe should have said, I didn't say this when I was, giving the presentation, one of the great joys that I have in this job is I get to go around Scotland and meet some incredible teams striving to make improvement. And I know I haven't spoken to a clinician who doesn't want to get those waiting lists down as quickly as possible. So I think that it's a fair challenge. It's one that we recognise. It's one that we're facing up to. But I have to be honest and say it's going to take time.
Okay, yeah, thanks, John. So again, picking up on the point there, where you're talking about the great pressures that you have on resources, and in your presentation you also talked a lot about MDT teams sort of on the front line. What's your view around the collaboration, or the collaboration, say, more in the back office? So this is a question from Cam, who's a member of our staff. Health economists, do you see a greater need or a use for their skill sets within the NHS in this decision making? So for instance, I know we have 2 health boards, I believe, that are very significantly in the red, up to about 40 million. Should we have health economists there helping to manage these resources and to ensure that we can, deliver the services that we need to deliver, and we're not sort of stopping surgeries or increasing waiting lists, etc. So I suppose it's, apart from the clinicians, where else do you see interdisciplinarity working in the NHS?
I think generally everywhere. I think one of the things that we saw from COVID, and I think it is a legacy, is collective team working, teams coming together and valuing what each other brings to the work. Without domestic teams, we wouldn't have theatres because nobody could work. But to the specifics on health economics, and you saw from my study I've done, I did the certificate. I can't claim to be an expert. I did a year's certificate, but it really gave me a tremendous insight into the importance of health economics. And I think we have lost some of that discipline in our work. And I think that there is a huge contribution that health economists can make in our work. And I think that when I look at the work already, and I do periodically try and dip into the work of and some of the publications, and you can see the wide range of contribution that's already being made through publications and other research. So I think that in itself demonstrates the value that health economics brings. But I think the point, and I guess at the heart of the question around, in terms of as we recover, as we look to perhaps difficult choices and challenges, then I think the discipline and the tools and skills that health economics would bring are absolutely necessary. Indeed, when I was in Ayrshire and Arran, I had a small team of health economists who everybody kept poaching. So I would no sooner have trained them and they would be stolen away by another NHS board. But we felt it was important. And I think that when I look at the change agenda, we tend sometimes to be very siloed in traditionally looking at acute services or community services. And I think we need to look at pathways of care. And how do we then best use our resources? And I mean all our resources, not just money, to be able to deliver the best we can. Because pathways of care, I think, is the best way to do that. And I guess, there are tools and techniques, isn't there? So I suppose in that area, thinking about allocative efficiency, for example, would be. So I think new technologies is probably already an area that we deploy health economics in terms of the evaluation. But I think choice is the other area that we're going to have to, when we engage with our communities, our stakeholders, there is always choice. And we know that stakeholders, whoever they are, whether they're individuals, they have preferences, they have values. And when I was reading back again and just was reminded a couple of months back, just the potential for discrete choice experiments and how that can help. And so I think that there is a wide opportunity here. But I think we've got to be quite deliberate in maybe re-engaging on this and think carefully about where that can add best value.
Okay, as you know, John, we're always happy to engage in health economics at GCU. Very strong field here. Picking up on the technology, so we'll change tack a wee bit. Rory, who is a student here, has asked an interesting question in. Our students are all over AI, as you know, very topical currently. But Rory's asking, can you foresee with these recent developments, AI, user-facing software, could this technology work within NHS Scotland? Are people thinking about AI, and where would you think it could have any potential substantial effect?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah, I know.
I think that it's interesting because one of the areas that is part of the work that I'm involved in is how we take forward innovation and how we translate innovation into practice. And AI is part of that. Now, it's not my field of expertise, but I think it is one of those areas. It's we've always got to be very careful about how we deploy new technologies and ensure that they're safe, they're ethical. But I think that when I talk to colleagues that are really directly involved in this, I get a very strong sense that they see this as a big part, both in clinical and in non-clinical services, and that it will become a more expansive part of how we deliver care. I was involved in a discussion, it must have been a good few months ago now, but with some clinical colleagues on AI and particularly on imaging and the ability to use artificial intelligence to read plain film X-rays. And there is work in Scotland where that is being tested. And from what I can see, with great success. Now, plain film, of course, is at the simple end of our imaging, but it's a volume. And I think if we could use artificial intelligence to effectively take away a large volume of reporting of things like plain film, then you can deploy the skills of your consultants and others to report the more complex images. So I think that, just as an example, demonstrates the potential that artificial intelligence has, and I know that people are excited about what that could be. But I would also say, and not to be a Luddite, because I think technology, is key. But while we're looking at those more exciting innovations, and AI is absolutely there for us, I think we also need to maximize just now the technologies that exist already, and deploy them to best effect, because I think that's part of how we recover forward. How do we give our patients the best patient experience that they can have, and how can we ensure that our staff are able to deploy technologies that help them to do their work. And we see lots within that space around robotics, as an example. But even the very simple text messaging can make a big difference in terms of how people experience services. But yes, the big question around AI is no question about the potential for this going into the future. I think it excites people, but as I say, we always need to think about the safety elements of it and the ethical implications in terms of deploying it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, I'm just going to ask my own follow-up question here, John. So when we're talking about new technologies or interventions, a criticism that comes up about the NHS quite often from researchers is the poor adoption and the difficulty to start trials, the difficulty to, pilot a new intervention. And we have many startup companies in this country, particularly in the life science field, will actually go overseas. So do you think now post-COVID, the NHS might be more receptive to working in the research and innovation sphere?
Absolutely, yes. Some of my colleagues have been progressing work just exactly on that, so that we can have an accelerated adoption for new innovations and new technologies, because we see that as critical. And some of the stuff in the chat there about releasing time for clinicians and other staff to focus in on where they can really add value from their skills. So taking some of that process out. So yeah, we're very, very minded of the need to see value and recognise the importance of innovation and the adoption of that, and indeed its impact then on the Scottish economy.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we move on to questions about John, I'll wrap up with my last sort of question around the NHS. We are both working in very disrupted sectors currently. We are both facing industrial action. We've got workforce shortages. For us as an HEI, have you got any advice, or how do you think we could work together more collaboratively as a nation to promote the benefits of a career within the NHS? You've been in the career for 40 years. I'm in academia. I love this career. So how could we work together? Because, it is fair to say the press is very negative. And so how could we do that better, do you think? How can we work more collaboratively as a nation?
Well, I think it's important to recognise that, whilst we have got very real challenges that we need to address, that every single day across the NHS, but also across collaborations, there is incredible work going on. I think if people knew more about that, they would see the benefits of a career, and they would see the value that they would bring and the value they would get from that. And so I think that we need to continue, I think, as an NHS, to work really closely and collaborate closely with our academic sector, to be able to promote the benefits, but also to see if there's ways to strengthen that collaboration that exists already. Because I think that where people see the opportunity or get the opportunity to even sample, or indeed to do sessions like this and have a chance to talk about the roles, it gives a different insight into what the work is, and the value and the importance of it. Yes, there are difficulties. Yes, it's challenging. The work can be challenging, and at times it can be difficult. But again, the innovation, the desire to embrace and to make change is a real strength. And I think as we build our teams forward, as we build multidisciplinary teams, never easy to say, and we see the opportunity that new and different roles will bring, that in itself, I think, will bring, I believe, a recognition and see these roles as attractive.
Okay, great, John. I look forward to working together. Right, let's go on to you, John. So I'm going to wrap two questions into one here. So a question from Jack and a question from Christine. Quite simple, but I expect the answer might be a bit longer. So what is it you like about your job? So, I think you've kind of said this in the presentation, but maybe, been in the NHS 40 years, why are you still there? And also, what's been your greatest challenge, do you think, throughout your career? You've obviously had a very long career, but what has been the greatest challenge, do you think?
So I think in terms of the first part of the question, what I like, number of things. Firstly, the people. There are fantastic people that work across our NHS, and indeed, our health and social care. As a chief executive, I wasn't restricted to the NHS. I was working in that health and social care space, and I met, tremendous people, and right across. We often sometimes get focused in on our acute services. We need to, recognise that in primary care, and I don't just mean general practice, I mean the wider primary care, in our communities, in mental health, in children's services, and women's health. There are just people who are so committed to trying to deliver the best they can, to deliver high quality care to those that need those services. And they feel the challenge just now. They feel that personally in terms of the job and the role that they want. But their commitment and their willingness to go the extra mile, it's inspiring. I have to say, during COVID, I would go out with my medical director and nurse director around Ayrshire and Arran, meeting teams, and just the commitment and their determination in difficult times and the way they adapt. It was humbling as a chief executive to hear their stories and be part of what they were doing and to lead them at that time. So yeah, no question about people, but variety. No 2 days are the same. Sometimes no 2 hours are the same. You have to be agile, and you have to be able to work across a whole range of topics in a day, and move and be fleet of foot, and that challenges the mind, but that variety is stimulating, and it's different things. You've got to do your research. You've got to be contemporary. You need to stay up to date with current thinking, and be able to engage with clinicians as well on their territory. And I am not a clinician, as you saw from my timeline. So yeah, people, variety, but people's got to be the number one. In terms of greatest challenge, well, I've had a few, I have to say, in my career. I did say during the when I was running through the slides, the pandemic was by absolutely a country mile, I think, the greatest challenge that, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that probably all of us in the NHS faced, and and I don't just mean in leadership, but leadership everywhere, and teams. Overnight we were pivoting and changing and adapting and adjusting and introducing new pathways, rolling out technology at a rate that you just couldn't conceive, and leading teams, then vaccination programs, mass vaccination programs. All of that brought a level of challenge to us that, well, we had to respond to, and of course that was the what we were there to do. But it was challenging because it was different. And I remember that first day driving into work of lockdown, and the roads were empty. And you were thinking, well, I wonder how many people are turning up today. And there was a full house. Everybody was there, huddling, planning, thinking. So that's been the greatest challenge. As I say, there's been many, but that's probably been the greatest, and a great learning for all of us coming through it. Maybe not in the middle of it, but coming through it.
Yes, it's better to be now at the other end.
Yes.
Question from Jill, who's a member of staff here. I can only imagine how stressful your role must be, the pressure and having to make very complex decisions, as you've been talking through with us. What advice would you give to any students or graduates who are perhaps looking to get into the more managerial side of the health service in terms of how you personally manage stress and pressure? So
I think the first thing I would say is you need to have your own resilience and inner resilience. You need to know how you build that, and you need to center yourself. I think the other thing I would say is it's important to have other interests, whatever those interests are. I've got family, I've got rugby, I've got hills, and without that, and particularly family, because family are your strongest advocates, and they're the ones that keep you going when it is difficult and it's challenging. So that's important. And I think being open about the challenges you face and not being afraid. This is why I think psychological safety is such an important aspect. We should be able to speak openly and freely about how we're feeling, and if we need to get help, to get help. But the other thing that's been helpful for me is good mentoring over my career. A good mentor is worth their weight in gold. And then laterally coaching. I've been fortunate to have an executive coach, and again, a safe space where you can actually work out your own issue, your own problem, but in a safe space. So coaching, mentoring, inner resilience, but make sure you've got strong outside interests, and work isn't everything that you do. And often that work-life balance can be very challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Really important for our mental health and well-being, isn't it?
Yes.
You mentioned there mentoring and coaching. Who's been your inspiration in your life, whether that has been a mentor or a coach or a figure externally that you look to that you feel is inspirational?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. I think it's interesting because when I look at people that inspire, there are many people in society that I think you look at and they inspire you by their approach. And I think that over the years, I've seen different people that I look and think, gosh, yes, there's something there that you've just done that's causing me to think. But I think that the other thing, it does come back to looking and learning from people that I have worked with. And I think that what I would say is you take the good from what you see, but you also learn about the things that you don't want. And I would say always be true to yourself, to your own values, and never dilute those, because they are key and critical to you. And that's what will help you through the difficult times.
Yeah, it's fantastic, John. I'm looking at the clock and that looks like we've run out of time. I can't believe that 30 minutes have gone so quickly. I do apologise to questions we didn't get around to. I know there are more in the chat. I do know that John Taylor will compile these for you and send them on to you, John. But thank you once again. I think you have been inspiring. So as well as your inspirations in life, you have been inspiring for our audience. Your philosophy, you know, around multidisciplinarity, the social determinants of health, working together, community, it resonates so much with our values here at GCU that we are just super delighted that you're one of our biggest supporters. So again, thank you for your time today, hugely appreciated, and we're very, very busy. And maybe it's still sunny wherever you are and you can get those steps in to keep you agile.
No, thank you very much. I've enjoyed that, and I hope it's been of interest to those that have joined, and thanks to everybody for joining.
Yes, hopefully we'll see you on campus sometime soon,
Yes.
John.